A few weeks ago, a Jehovah's Witness called my phone. So I'm going to share some of his strongest arguments. I'm going to show you the errors within those arguments and then let you know how I was able to refute them. This way you will be prepared for when you have your encounter with a Jehovah's Witness. The first argument is that Jesus is the firstborn of all creation. According to him, firstborn means first created. The second argument is that Jesus is the Son of God. And according to him, a son must have a father who created him. The third argument is that Jesus is the only begotten Son. And the way he sees it is that begotten means you were created or you were brought into existence. Now, let's get into how I was able to refute these arguments. So the first argument is that Jesus is the firstborn of all creation. And according to him, firstborn means first created. The way how he came to this conclusion is based on the scripture from Colossians chapter 1 and verse 15. So I'll read this verse, but I'm going to be reading it from the New World Translation. No, this is their translation. That's called the New World Translation. It can be found on their website at jw.org. Now, the reason why I'm reading from their translation is because whenever you're refuting a Jehovah's Witness, you have to read their version of the Bible because they were taught that their version is the only correct version. However, I want to caution you, do not use this version of the Bible for your personal study. Reason being is that it has errors and modifications throughout the Bible, which actually, words have been added to the text, which actually changes the meaning of the text. So Colossians 1 and verse 15 says, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation." He interpreted the word firstborn to mean first created. So how did I answer this? Since many other verses confirms the deity of Jesus, I knew that firstborn could not mean first created. All that's happening in this verse is that it's taking the principle of firstborn and applying it to Jesus. So let me explain this principle of firstborn. In the Old Testament, the firstborn son would have the preeminence over all the other sons. The principle of firstborn in this context is preeminence. Colossians 1 and verse 15 is not telling us that Jesus was created, but it's telling us that Jesus had the preeminence over all of his creation. We see the word firstborn being applied to individuals in the Bible who were not actually firstborns in the literal sense of the word, like David. So David was the youngest of 7 siblings, right? So David was actually the last born, but yet the Bible placed this title of firstborn unto David. This can be seen in Psalm 89 verses 20 through 27. Now bear in mind, I am reading from the New World Translation. "I have found David my servant. With my holy oil I have anointed him. My hand will support him, and my arm will strengthen him. No enemy will exact tribute from him, and no unrighteous man will oppress him. I will crush to pieces his adversaries from before him, and strike down those who hate him. My faithfulness and loyal love are with him, and in my name his strength will be exalted. I will put his hand over the sea and his right hand over the rivers. He will call out to me, 'You are my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation.' And I will place him as firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth." So verse 27 gives us the meaning of firstborn, which is the highest of all the kings of the earth. So this is letting us know that David had the preeminence over all the kings of the earth. Similarly, in Colossians chapter 1 and verse 15, it's not telling us that Jesus was created, but it's letting us know that Jesus had the preeminence over all of his creation. The amplified version of the Bible captures the meaning of this text very accurately. So I'm going to read for you Colossians 1:15 in the Amplified Version. He is the exact living image, the essential manifestation of the unseen God, the visible representation of the invisible, the firstborn, the preeminent one, the sovereign, and the originator of all creation. Now let's get into his second argument, which states that Jesus is the Son of God and a son must have a father who created him. So the way he sees it is that Jehovah is the one God, the one true God and Father who created Jesus the Son. So how did I answer this? I told him that if I was to follow his logic, then Jehovah the Father himself must have been created, because an earthly father must have a father who brought him into existence. So as you can see, that argument does not stand up to scrutiny. The fact of the matter is that God the Father and the Son are both eternal, which means they are without beginning and end, and therefore must be uncreated. Now take note of Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6, which describes the Son as being eternal. Now in Isaiah 9 verse 6 it says, "For a child has been born to us, a son has been given to us, and the rulership will rest on his shoulder. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace." Now let's get into his third argument, which states that Jesus is the only begotten Son. And the way he sees it is that begotten means that you were created or brought into existence. So how did I answer this? I showed the biblical definition of begotten, which implies a unique son. So the scripture I used to show this is taken from Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 17, which reads, "By faith Abraham, when he was tested, as good as offered up Isaac, the man who had gladly received the promises, attempted to offer up his only begotten son." So here we see the scripture is describing Isaac as Abraham's only begotten son. But was Isaac actually his only begotten son? Abraham had another son whose name was Ishmael. So he was actually born before Isaac. But yet we've never seen the Bible applying the title of only begotten son to Ishmael. The point is, the title only begotten has nothing to do with being created or brought into existence, but it speaks of the uniqueness of the son. So Isaac was Abraham's unique son because he's the one that God promised Abraham through whom the Messiah would come. In the same way, the title only begotten son being placed on Jesus has nothing to do with him being created or brought into existence, but it's speaking of the uniqueness. Jesus is God's unique son, because you and I are not sons in the same way that Jesus is, because Jesus is God's eternal son, and you and I cannot make that claim. So just to recap, his first argument was that Jesus is the firstborn of all creation, meaning that he was created according to him. But I've shown that firstborn has nothing to do with being created, but it speaks of preeminence, showing that Jesus has the preeminence over all of his creation that he has created. His second argument is that Jesus is the Son of God, and a son must have a father who brought him into existence. And then I showed that that argument falls apart because in human terms, an earthly father himself must also have a father who brought him into existence. So if we should follow his logic, that would mean then that God the Father, right, who they believe is Jehovah himself would have had to have a father who brought him into existence. His third argument was that Jesus is the only begotten son, meaning, and that begotten means that he was created or brought into existence. And I've shown that the term only begotten Son speaks of the uniqueness of the Son. So these are just 3 of the arguments that were presented to me. So I'll do a follow-up video with some other arguments that were presented and show how I was able to answer those as well. All right, so this way you'll be edified, equipped, and ready to defend the truth when you come into contact with a Jehovah's Witness. So if you enjoyed this video and if it was helpful to you in any way, then do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, like, comment, and share.